Cool.
How's it going, everyone? Devin here with Make Anything, and today's project is relatively simple, but also extremely satisfying. It's something that I started many years ago, and I just continued working on it a little bit lately. You know, I've had so many great ideas come in from you guys and just things that I've thought of that I'm starting a whole bunch of projects, and I need to start getting around to actually finishing them. But until then, this one should hold us over. It's pretty cool.
So all these designs here are basically an iteration of the same concept. So this is the first one I created right here. And the idea is that I have a container with an inner and outer shell, and it's extruded and twisted together. So these containers essentially thread together, but the thread itself is what makes the design of the piece. With a good printer, it's really smooth and very satisfying. So that's why I've made so many of these.
So that's one of my earlier examples. I also have this one that I've been using in my car for at least a year, and it's just a little trash bin for my cup holder.
It uses that same twist mechanism to attach the top, and it's also got a little door to throw your junk in. And because it's been in the heat so long, it bulged on the bottom, but it doesn't really affect the use in the cup holder, and it's kind of fun. But yeah, the idea is pretty much that the threading mechanism is also a design feature. This little guy doesn't look too interesting at first glance, but it's another fun one. This is a nesting twist container. So you take the first one off and find there's another one. And you take that off and there's another, and so on. And when you eventually find the centerpiece, what's inside? Money. So that's kind of a neat way to give someone a cash gift without just sticking it inside of a card. This one is a concept that I never quite finished. It was supposed to have a knob on the bottom, and when you twisted it, this part would pop up, kind of like a push pop or a lipstick. But basically the twist angle here was too shallow that my mechanism didn't work. I could have just twisted it more and got it to work, but I don't know. I never got around to it. I'm always eager to move on to the next thing, you know?
So those are the ones I did a couple years ago, and then I started making a few new ones just because I can print larger now, so I'm playing around with making them really big, and I just wanted to try a few different designs for you guys. This one is probably the most satisfying because I got the tolerance down really well.
As you can see, it opens and closes really slowly and smoothly, and that's because the tolerance is so tight that just enough air is allowed to get out for it to close on its own. And for my printer, that tolerance was 0.6 millimeters. Here's another one I made, and it looks pretty similar, but this one I printed using vase mode, so it's a single wall thick, and the tolerance here is super tight, so it actually can't close on its own, but with a little assistance, it will slide closed. So vase mode lets you make those really smooth prints so that it can have this incredibly tight tolerance, but still open and close really nicely. And despite being just one layer thick, vase mode makes it surprisingly strong, so it's pretty flexible. So I did record the design process for making this piece as well as this really crazy one here. So I'll show you guys that in just a minute. Here's one last one that I made. Just another concept ideation. It's kind of this U shape that's spiraled around. So it's less useful as an actual container, but it still connects in that super satisfying way. So I really like this one as well.
So that's my little collection of twist vases. I will quickly show you a little bit of the process behind making some of these, the ones that I made with vase mode, and I've got a lot of time lapses for all these as well. So let's check that out.
Alright, so here we are in SOLIDWORKS, and I'm going to show you how I made one of these simpler twist vases. So to start off, I just need a shape that I want to twist, and in this case I just decided to use a pentagon. Now in a perpendicular plane, I want to draw a vertical line from the center of wherever I want it to twist, and I'll dimension that to be the height of my container. I'm going to go back into that original sketch, And I'll round each of those corners just so that it becomes almost a circle, but not quite. If you had a circle, of course, you couldn't really twist it, but since it's got this kind of lumpiness, I can give it a nice twist. I'll do another sketch on the same top plane where I did my first sketch and just offset it by 0.55 millimeters, which I will use to make the outer shell of the container. Then I'll select that first sketch as well as the vertical line and select Swept Boss Base. And here's the secret. You go into the options and use this specify twist value to give your shape that twist you need. In this case, I'm doing a 180-degree twist, but you can change that depending on how you want your design to look. Then I'll do the exact same thing using that slightly larger sketch. Now I can color one of the bodies, and you will see that there's this weird blend of colors, and that just means that the two models are occupying the exact same space, which is what I want in this case. So I'm going to hide the inner body, and I'm going to convert this top face, extrude it 2 millimeters, and give it a 45-degree chamfer, so that it's not just a sharp corner at the bottom. Then I'm going to work on that inner part and create an offset on the bottom here to create a lip that you can grab to take the two parts apart. So I'll just make that 4 millimeters. I want it to be very sleek, but you really don't want to go less than that, otherwise you won't have any room to grab. It's already pretty narrow. But now if I bring that outer part back together, you can see we've got a nice container. I'll just go ahead and select a face and save it as an STL. But do note, you want to go into the STL options and make sure that you have a really high resolution. So your angle and deviation should be really high up here. And that's going to create a part that's very dense. As you can see, there's a lot of polygons here, but that's what you need to have a nice smooth print. So here is that outside shell printing out in vase mode. And the inner part as well. So I twisted those together, and well, this first attempt ended up being a very, very tight fit. So tight, in fact, that I kind of broke it trying to take the two apart. That's not ideal, so I went back into SOLIDWORKS to make a couple changes. So back in SOLIDWORKS, I'm going to select that smaller inside sketch, and I'm going to offset that inwards to create a larger tolerance. So I'll actually make that 0.2 millimeters, but remember that's 0.2 millimeters in addition to the 0.55 millimeters that I have the other sketch offset in the opposite direction. I'm also going to do chamfer on the top edge here so that it's easier to connect the two parts of the container together. I'll also do a fillet to make it nice and rounded. Now here on the bottom, I noticed it was a weak point when I was printing in vase mode. So what I actually want to do is give it a 45-degree chamfer. That way when I'm printing in vase mode, it spirals upward at an angle instead of just creating a gap when it's trying to go from that thicker lip to the slightly thinner inside. You can see what I'm talking about when I preview it here in my slicer, Simplify 3D. I already have a vase mode set, but as you can see, even with that 45-degree angle, you can still see through the layers a bit, and that means that the adhesion between the layers isn't going to be great. One quick way to help with that layer adhesion is to just lower the height of the layers. So I'm going to go from 0.2 millimeter layer height to 0.15 for this one. As far as vase mode, you can see I have 0 top layers and 3 bottom layers, just so I have a bottom to that vase, and the top is completely open. So here is that slightly revised version, and as you can see, it fits together a lot more smoothly, and because of that little taper I have on the top, it's a lot easier to just throw the two pieces together. Alright, super quickly I'll show you how I did the more complex Crazy Twist vase. So here I'm using the spline tool and just creating a super elaborate shape. And I can pull these handles around as I wish and kind of develop my shape that way. If you're having trouble controlling your splines, it's also really helpful if you right-click on that line and select Display Control Polygons. And as you'll see, that'll bring up these gray dotted lines that are additional handles that you can use to change the shape. And this time when I try to offset my part, it doesn't offset the entire outline. And that's because I made my part just a little too complicated. There's some really tight curves where the offset function is just getting confused. So I can go back into that spline and kind of work on those troubled areas and make sure there aren't any points that are curving too tight. I want it to be a nice flowy shape. So just like before, I'm going to have the vertical line along which to sweep, and I can play around with where I want that vertical axis to be, and that'll kind of affect how it twists upwards. As long as I do the same thing for both shells, and it's just a simple twist, you can make a container like this out of just about any shape. Now with a shape this crazy, I can't really just chamfer the edges, but what I can do is convert that edge to an upward extrude and have that drafted inward at 45 degrees, which is pretty similar to just adding a chamfer around the edges. So there's my outside shell, and now I'll create a lip on the inside shell again. So what I'll do here is do an outward draft of 45 degrees, then another extrude straight down, and then one final extrude drafting inward again. And that gives me a lip that I can print very nicely in vase mode. So that container is just about done, but let's not forget about that little taper we want on the top of the inside container. Even a little 1mm chamfer is really going to help make it easier to connect those two containers, and I'll fillet that as well. Here are our two parts printing together, and here's my first test fit. Now this giant U-twist vase was more trouble than I expected it to be. I designed it essentially the same exact way as that last one, but for some reason the tolerances were not the same, so even with the same tolerance, this was a really tight fit that I couldn't get together. I ended up needing a really big tolerance, like 1mm, which was surprising, and it took me quite a few times to get that to fit right. I even tried printing one with flexible filament, which as you can see was a total disaster, but it's still kind of fun watching it wobble around in the time lapse. Alright guys, there you have it, my collection of super satisfying twist containers. I hope you learned something, or at least had fun watching. You can download a handful of these containers through my mini factory, where I have them available for free. And if you just want the whole collection, check out my digital goods store, where you can get that as well. All the links are available in the description to this video. Until next time, I'm Devin. This is Make Anything. Don't forget to stay inspired.